Horror fans, let me ask you, have you ever felt eyes on you in the dark when you're certain you're alone? That silence so thick it presses against your chest, and the chilling certainty that something is watching, waiting, just out of sight. On Halloween night, the shadows grow deeper. The line between our world and the unknown blur, and the things that lurk in the darkness are closer than you think. For some, Halloween is harmless fun, but for others, it's the night their worst nightmares clawed into reality and left scars that never healed. Tonight you'll hear 5 true Halloween horror stories. Each one happened to real people, each one a descent into terror. So if you think you're safe, if you believe the darkness can't reach you, think again. Because sometimes the real horror is already inside your house. Have you ever felt like someone was watching you? Not in a fleeting, passing on the street sort of way, but a persistent, unnerving sensation that prickles the back of your neck and makes the hairs on your arms stand on end. It's a feeling that tells you you're not alone, even when you're certain you should be. For a young woman named Clara, this feeling became a constant companion, a sixth sense she couldn't shake after she ended her 2-year relationship with a man named Mark. It started subtly, a feeling she would dismiss as simple post-breakup paranoia, a side effect of untangling her life from another's. The breakup itself had been difficult, but necessary. Mark's affection had slowly morphed into a suffocating possessiveness she could no longer tolerate. He needed to know where she was at all times, who she was with, what she was doing. His love felt less like a comfort and more like a cage. When she finally found the strength to leave, she felt a profound sense of relief, a breath of fresh air after being submerged for too long. But that relief was short-lived, soon replaced by a creeping unease that settled deep in her bones, a silent alarm that something was fundamentally wrong. It began with small, almost insignificant things. A flicker of movement in her peripheral vision as she walked to her car after work. The distinct feeling of eyes on her as she sat in her living room, even with the blinds drawn shut. She would tell herself she was being irrational, that her mind was playing tricks on her, inventing threats where none existed. She tried to rationalize it, blaming the stress of the breakup and the loneliness that sometimes followed. But the feeling was too specific, too tangible to be a simple figment of her imagination. It was a cold, calculated presence she could feel, even if she couldn't see it. She'd pause in the middle of a task, her head snapping up, her ears straining to catch a sound that wasn't there. She'd scan the street from her window, searching for a car that didn't belong. A person lingering for just a moment too long. Her apartment, once her sanctuary, began to feel like a glass box, leaving her exposed and vulnerable. This constant state of alert was exhausting, fraying her nerves and making her jump at every unexpected noise. The question haunted her day and night. Was this just the ghost of her past relationship? Or was the man she had left refusing to become a memory? The story I'm about to share with you follows a man named Liam, a graphic designer who sought refuge in the quiet anonymity of a new city. He was trying to escape the ghost of a past relationship, one that had ended not with a bang, but with a deeply unsettling whimper. His ex-girlfriend Sarah had taken their breakup poorly, her sadness quickly spiraling into something far more obsessive and strange. It wasn't loud or aggressive, but a quiet, creeping campaign of digital harassment that had started to bleed into his real life, making him feel constantly monitored and exposed. He hoped a clean break and a new address would be enough to sever the connection for good. His new apartment was a minimalist space in a sprawling modern complex, a stark contrast to the cozy shared home he had left behind. He relished the feeling of a fresh start, the blank canvas on which he could paint a new life, free from the echoes of the past. For the first few weeks it worked. The silence was peaceful, not threatening. He threw himself into his work, explored his new neighborhood, and slowly began to feel the tight knot of anxiety in his chest begin to loosen. He believed he had successfully outrun his past, that the distance had finally granted him the peace he so desperately craved. He had taken every precaution he could think of. He changed his phone number, deleted his old social media profiles, and was careful about who he shared his new address with. He was essentially a ghost online, a digital phantom with no ties to his previous life. He felt secure in his anonymity, confident that Sarah had no way of finding him. The constant, low-level hum of fear that had become the soundtrack to his final months in his old city had faded, replaced by a cautious optimism for the future. He was finally free. But obsession has a way of seeping through the cracks of even the most well-constructed defenses. It is a patient hunter, and distance is often a temporary shield, not a permanent solution. Liam's newfound peace was fragile, built on the assumption that he had escaped. He was unaware that the ghost he was running from was far more resourceful than he could have ever imagined. The quiet he was enjoying was merely the calm before the storm, a brief respite before the echoes of his past would return, not as a whisper, but as a blood-curdling scream through the static. The first sign that his escape had failed came not through a knock on the door or a strange car parked on his street, but through his computer. Liam worked from home, spending hours in front of his dual monitor setup. One afternoon, while deep in a complex design project, his screen flickered. A small black command prompt window flashed open for a fraction of a second and then disappeared. It was so fast he almost missed it. He blinked, thinking it was just a system glitch, a common occurrence in the world of software and drivers. He dismissed it and went back to his work. A few days later, it happened again. This time the window stayed open for a full second, long enough for him to see a line of text being typed before it vanished. He couldn't make out the words, but the deliberate typed nature of it was unmistakable. This was not a random glitch. A cold dread began to creep up his spine. He immediately ran a full virus scan, a deep rootkit check, and every other diagnostic tool he had. The results all came back clean. There was no malware, no Trojan, no logical explanation for what he was seeing. The strange occurrences escalated. His mouse cursor would occasionally move on its own, drifting slowly across the screen as if guided by an unseen hand. It would hover over files, open folders, and then stop as if the person on the other end was simply looking around, familiarizing themselves with his digital space. It was a subtle yet terrifying invasion. He felt a profound sense of violation, as if someone was looking over his shoulder, their face just inches from his, their breath on his neck. His digital sanctuary had been breached. Then came the music. Late one night, as he was about to log off, his speakers crackled to life. A song began to play, a faint, tinny melody that he recognized instantly. It was their song, a track by an obscure indie band that he and Sarah had loved. The sound filled his silent apartment, an auditory ghost from a life he had tried so hard to bury. He frantically checked his media players, his browser tabs. Nothing was open. The music seemed to be coming from the very soul of the machine itself. A message sent from the digital ether, a clear and terrifying signal that Sarah had found him. For Sarah, moving to the quiet suburban town of Crestwood was supposed to be a fresh start, a clean slate after the tumultuous end of her relationship with Mark. The breakup had been messy, a whirlwind of possessiveness and control that had slowly suffocated her over the course of 2 years. She found a small, charming apartment on the second floor of a converted Victorian house, its bay windows overlooking a street lined with ancient oak trees. The peace was exactly what she needed, a stark contrast to the constant tension she had lived with for so long. She unpacked her boxes, filling the empty rooms with her belongings, each object a testament to her newfound independence. It felt good, like she was finally reclaiming her own life. She spent her first few weeks exploring the town, discovering cozy cafes and hidden bookstores. She made friends with her downstairs neighbour, an elderly woman named Mrs. Gable, who baked the most delicious apple pies. Sarah started a new job at the local library, the scent of old paper and ink, a comforting balm to her frayed nerves. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, she felt a sense of calm settle over her. Mark was a ghost of the past, a memory she was determined to leave behind. She had blocked his number, his social media, and had made it clear to their mutual friends that she wanted no contact. The distance felt safe, a solid wall she had built around her new life. Life in Crestwood was idyllic, almost too perfect. The sun seemed to shine a little brighter, the air smelled a little sweeter. Sarah would take long walks in the evenings, watching the sunset paint the sky in hues of orange and purple. She felt herself healing, the emotional scars from her past relationship slowly beginning to fade. She was no longer the timid, anxious person Mark had moulded her into. She was rediscovering the confident, happy woman she used to be. The constant feeling of being watched, of having to justify her every move, was gone. She was free, and the feeling was absolutely exhilarating, a breath of fresh air after drowning for so long. But sometimes, in the dead of night, a flicker of the old fear would return. A floorboard creaking in the old house, the rustle of leaves outside her window, would send a jolt of adrenaline through her. She would dismiss it as her imagination, the lingering echoes of past trauma. She'd tell herself that Mark was hundreds of miles away, that he had no idea where she was. She had been so careful, so meticulous in her escape. There was no way he could find her. She was safe. She had to be. This new chapter was hers and hers alone, and she wouldn't let the shadows of her past darken its pages. The first sign that something was wrong was subtle, easily dismissed. It was a single perfect red rose left on the windshield of her car, parked in its designated spot behind the apartment building. There was no note, no card, nothing to indicate who it was from. Sarah assumed it was a secret admirer from town, perhaps someone from the library. While a little unusual, she found it sweet and thought nothing more of it, placing the rose in a small vase on her kitchen windowsill. A few days later, her favourite, very specific brand of coffee from a small batch roaster she loved back in her old city appeared on her doorstep. This was more concerning. It wasn't something you could just buy at the local Crestwood market. A cold knot of dread began to form in the pit of her stomach. She tried to rationalise it. Maybe a friend had sent it as a housewarming gift and forgotten to include a note. She sent a text to her closest friends, but they all denied sending it. The coincidence was unsettling, a discordant note in the peaceful symphony of her new life. She started to feel a familiar prickle on the back of her neck, the sensation of being watched that she had tried so hard to forget. She found herself looking over her shoulder more often, her gaze lingering on strangers in the grocery store, wondering if they were watching her. The incidents grew more specific, more personal. One morning she found a small, intricately carved wooden bird on her welcome mat. It was identical to one Mark had bought for her on their first anniversary, a piece she had deliberately left behind when she moved. Her blood ran cold. This couldn't be a coincidence. The chances were astronomical. It was a message, a clear and terrifying signal that he knew where she was. The wall she had built around herself suddenly felt like it was made of glass, fragile and transparent. The sense of security she had cherished was shattering into a million tiny pieces. Panic began to set in. How could he have found her? She had covered her tracks so carefully, telling no one her new address. She drove to the local police station, her hands trembling on the steering wheel. She tried to explain her situation to the officer at the desk, but without any direct threats or evidence of stalking, her story sounded like a series of strange but harmless coincidences. "Maybe you have a very persistent admirer, miss," the officer said dismissively. She left the station feeling helpless and invalidated, the fear now a cold, heavy weight in her chest. She was alone in this, and the shadow of her past was growing longer and darker. The stories you've heard tonight are a chilling reminder that some doors, once opened, can never be truly closed. They show us that the deepest horrors often wear a familiar face, and that the past we try to escape can have a terrifying way of catching up to us, no matter how far we run or how well we hide. The shadows of what was can stretch long into our present, twisting our sense of safety into a constant state of alert, making us question every creak in the floor and every unexpected knock at the door. It's a fear that seeps into the quietest moments, turning a peaceful night into a vigil of anxiety. The human heart is a complex and often dark place, capable of a love that can curdle into a dangerous obsession. When affection becomes possession and care becomes control, the lines blur, and the person you once trusted can become your greatest threat. These narratives serve as a stark warning about the ghosts we create in our own lives, the ones that don't need haunted houses or ancient curses to exist. They live in memories, in old text messages, and in the lingering feeling that you are never, ever truly alone, even when you're locked safely inside your own home. We build walls around ourselves, both physical and emotional, hoping to keep the darkness out. We change our numbers, move to new towns and try to start over, believing a clean slate is possible. But sometimes the most determined monsters are the ones who hold a key to our past, who know our habits, our fears and our deepest vulnerabilities. They are the ones who will stop at nothing to reclaim what they believe is theirs, turning our sanctuaries into prisons and our peace into a waking nightmare. They remind us that true safety is a fragile illusion, easily shattered. So tonight, as you turn off the lights and settle into the silence of your own home, take an extra moment. Check the locks on your doors and draw the curtains tight against the peering darkness of the outside world. Listen closely to the sounds of the night and hope that they are nothing more than the house settling. Because you never know who might be listening back, waiting patiently in the shadows for a chance to remind you of a past you thought you had buried. Remember, sometimes the past doesn't stay where it belongs. Stay safe and keep your doors locked.